Hey there, horror fans, and welcome back to the Real Talk Horror. This is the place where we break down the spine-chilling, the hair-raising, and the downright bizarre. I'm your host, Josh Bell, and I'm thrilled to have you here as we continue our deep dive into the world of John Carpenter, one of horror's true masters. Today, we're tackling Christine, a 1983 gem that brings together two creative powerhouses: Carpenter's signature atmospheric direction and Stephen King's storytelling magic. The result? A tale that asks the question, what happens when your first love is a murderous, sentient Plymouth Fury? Spoiler alert, it's a wild ride. Released on December 9th, 1983, Christine may not have that universal recognition of Halloween or the cult status of The Thing, but it occupies a unique space in Carpenter's career. This isn't just a horror film, it's a psychological exploration wrapped in a supernatural thriller. Think Rebel Without a Cause, but swap the misunderstood teen angst for a deadly car chase and a killer soundtrack straight out of the 50s. What makes Christine stand out, though, is its shift in tone for Carpenter. Coming off the heels of The Thing, which, despite now being hailed as a masterpiece, at the time was still a box office disappointment, Carpenter found himself needing to adapt. This time he turned to a Stephen King bestseller, crafting a movie that's less about gore and jump scares and more about obsession, revenge, and the dark side of desire. It's Carpenter in experimental mode, refining his craft while showing us he's not just the guy who makes slasher films or alien horror. So buckle up, pun intended, because we're about to take a closer look at what makes Christine a fascinating addition to Carpenter's resume and a must-watch for fans of both horror and supernatural storytelling. So let's crank up the tunes, turn on the high beams, and dive in. Let's start with a breakdown. Christine, at its core, is a film that tells the story of Arnie Cunningham, a shy, awkward high schooler who's on the losing end of life. He's got overbearing parents, a best friend who's everything he's not, handsome, popular, athletic, and a group of bullies who seem to make it their life's mission to torment him. Poor Arnie can't catch a break until he meets Christine. And Christine is no ordinary car. She's a 1958 Plymouth Fury that Arnie discovers rotting away in someone's yard. Beat up, rusted, and downright pitiful, she's a far cry from her glory days. But Arnie is immediately drawn to her, as if fate or something darker has intervened. Against the advice of his best friend Dennis and the protests of his parents, Arnie buys Christine and becomes obsessed with restoring her. Here's the twist, though. Christine isn't just a car. She's alive, she has a mind of her own, and she's fiercely protective of Arnie. If anyone crosses him, or worse, insults her, they don't just get a flat tire. Christine has her own way of dealing with enemies, and let's just say it's not covered by your standard insurance policy. The real horror of Christine isn't just her murderous tendencies, though. It's in the way Arnie changes. As he spends more time with Christine, he begins to shed his awkward insecurities. At first, this transformation seems like a win for Arnie. He stands taller, he speaks confidently, and even attracts the attention of Lee, the girl of his dreams. But as Christine takes hold of him, the newfound confidence morphs into arrogance, cruelty, and eventually something downright sinister. The story isn't just about a killer car. It's about obsession and the seductive nature of power. Arnie and Christine are symbiotic. Her possessiveness mirrors his growing darkness, and together they become an unstoppable force. It's Carpenter at his best, diving into the psychology of his characters while wrapping it all up in a supernatural thrill ride. Now let's talk about the characters that drive this narrative. Again, pun intended. Arnie, played by Keith Gordon, is the emotional heart of the film. Watching his evolution from nerdy, awkward teenager to dangerously unhinged is unsettling but mesmerizing. Gordon plays both sides of Arnie so convincingly that you almost feel sorry for him, even when he's spiraling out of control. Then there's Dennis, Arnie's best friend, portrayed by John Stockwell. Dennis is the classic good guy, the moral compass of the story, the one trying to pull Arnie back from the brink. Their friendship is the backbone of the film, making Arnie's descent into darkness even more heartbreaking. And obviously you can't forget Christine herself. Carpenter does a really great job here of making the car a fully realized character. From the way she gleams after Arnie restores her, to the haunting way her headlights flare to life when she's on the hunt, Christine really oozes with menace. This is a car with personality, attitude, and a whole lot of deadly intent. So the core of Christine becomes more than a horror story. It becomes a cautionary tale about the allure of power, the cost of obsession, and what happens when the lines between love and control blur. Buckle up though, this ride is just getting started. So let's pop the hood and take a look at what went into building Christine. After the critical and commercial disappointment of The Thing, which is wild to think about now considering it's a horror masterpiece, but anyways, John Carpenter was looking for a project that could get him back in Hollywood's good graces. Enter Christine. With a $10 million budget and a script adapted from Stephen King's best-selling novel, Carpenter had a chance to create something unique while still playing within the studio system. Carpenter knew he couldn't rely on flashy effects or massive set pieces, so he did what he does best. He crafted an atmosphere so thick you could cut it with a knife. His focus was on the psychological underpinnings of the story, how obsession and power can corrupt, and he used every tool in his arsenal to make that come alive. And talking about casting, Keith Gordon as Arnie Cunningham was a bold choice. Gordon, not a household name, but Carpenter saw something in him that others might have overlooked. And boy, it paid off. Gordon absolutely nails the transition from Arnie's awkward, nerdy beginnings to his dark, confident, menacing end. You feel for him at first, then you fear him, and that's all thanks to Gordon's layered performance. Rounding out the cast, we talked about John Stockwell. Stockwell brings this grounded, everyman quality to the role, serving as our anchor as the audience in the middle of the supernatural chaos. And there's Alexandra Paul as Lee, Arnie's love interest. Paul gives Lee a mix of vulnerability and strength and makes her more than the stereotypical damsel in distress. The cast here creates a believable emotional core that balances some of the film's more supernatural out there elements. And the real star of the show, though, is Christine herself. Over 20 different Plymouth Furies were used during production, each customized to portray Christine at different stages. From the rusted out heap Arnie finds to the gleaming blood-red machine of death she becomes. And here's a fun fact. Christine wasn't actually a Plymouth Fury in King's novel. She was a slightly different novel. But Carpenter and his team chose the Fury because it had the perfect mix of sleekness and menace. The practical effects used to bring Christine to life are a testament to that old school Hollywood ingenuity. From the famous self-repairing scenes, the crew used hydraulic rigs to crush the car's body panels and then ran the footage in reverse. It's such a simple yet effective technique that still looks impressive. There's a tactile quality to these effects that CGI can't quite replicate, and that's part of what makes Christine really feel so timeless. Interestingly though, Carpenter didn't compose the score for this film, a rarity in his career. Instead, Alan Howarth handled the music. But again, Carpenter's influence is still felt. The film's 1950s rock and roll soundtrack is a stroke of genius. Songs like Bad to the Bone by George Thorogood and the Destroyers and other era-specific hits give Christine her swagger. It's like the car has her own jukebox, reinforcing her personality and her sinister charm. And then don't forget about the challenges of working with cars as key actors. Christine might have looked cool on screen, but behind the scenes, the crew had to deal with everything from mechanical failures to choreographing stunt sequences with precision. Those epic moments when Christine hunts down her victims, they weren't just camera tricks. They were meticulously planned sequences that required a mix of engineering and artistry. And all of this came together under Carpenter's watchful eye. In this case, he wasn't just a director. He was a storyteller, a craftsman, and a visionary who knew how to take a modest budget and create something unforgettable. Christine, again, may not have had that box office success that Carpenter hoped for, but again, its legacy proves it was a project built to last, just like the titular car. So let's talk about how Christine shines as a prime example of John Carpenter's signature style. Even though this is an adaptation of a Stephen King novel, Carpenter's fingerprints are all over it. From the way the tension creeps into every frame to the underlying themes of isolation and transformation. First, let's dive into Carpenter's unparalleled mastery of suspense. He doesn't just show Christine as a killer car. He builds her menace piece by piece. Long, lingering shots of her pristine, blood-red exterior give her a hypnotic allure. Then there's the ominous growl of her engine, which feels more like a predator than a machine. And of course, we have the iconic glowing headlights piercing through the darkness, an image that's as unnerving as it is unforgettable. Carpenter knows that sometimes what you don't see is scarier than what you do see, and he uses those glowing lights to signal Christine's presence, letting our imaginations do the rest. And then speaking of atmosphere, how about the sound? Like I said, Carpenter didn't compose it this time, but Alan Howarth really did an amazing job here. You can still feel the deep understanding of how music drives the film's mood. The 50s rock and roll tracks, they add a layer of dark irony. Upbeat, nostalgic songs creating a chilling contrast to Christine's violent outbursts. It's a move that is quintessentially Carpenter, subverting expectations by blending comfort and terror in the same scene. But the genius of Carpenter's style isn't just in what you hear, it's in what you see. Christine's reflection, for instance, Carpenter frequently uses her glossy exterior to mirror Arnie's transformation. As Arnie becomes more consumed by Christine's influence, you often see his face reflected in her hood, distorted and gleaming. It's subtle, but it's incredibly effective in showing how their fates are intertwined. And then there's Carpenter's camera work. His love of wide, expansive shots is on full display here, and it creates a sense of isolation even amongst this suburban setting. When it's Christine stalking her victims or Arnie working on her late at night, the framing always emphasizes how small and vulnerable the characters are compared to the supernatural power that they're up against. And the pacing, Carpenter's trademark slow burn suspense, allows the tension to simmer before boiling over in these explosive and unforgettable moments. And then there's that underdog theme. Carpenter has always gravitated towards stories about ordinary people pushed to their breaking points, whether it's Laurie Strode in Halloween, MacReady in The Thing. In Christine, we see this through Arnie's journey. At first, he's the underdog, shy, bullied kid who's ignored by his peers. But instead of overcoming his struggles in a triumphant and heartwarming way, Arnie's consumed by them. His desire for power and revenge becomes his downfall, and Carpenter handles the transformation with a deft, empathetic touch. Even the supernatural elements are handled in a way that's uniquely Carpenter. Christine isn't just a haunted car. She's a character imbued with personality and purpose. John Carpenter gives her a sense of agency. She doesn't just react, she schemes, manipulates, and asserts control. This blend of the human and the supernatural is a hallmark of Carpenter's work, and it's what makes this film so compelling. And finally, we can't talk about Carpenter's style without mentioning his ability to balance horror with deeper themes. Christine is absolutely a horror film, but it's also a story about obsession, control, and identity. It's about how external forces, whether it's a haunted car or societal pressures, can prey on our vulnerabilities and change who we are. Carpenter doesn't just scare us, he makes us think, and that's what sets his films like this apart. Whether it's the chilling visuals, the tension-filled pacing, or that layered storytelling, Christine is Carpenter doing what he does best. He's blending the supernatural with the deeply human and crafting a film that sticks with you and lasts forever. Let's talk about the impact and legacy of Christine. Now, it wasn't a runaway box office success. It earned a respectable but modest $21 million against its $10 million budget. But like the best of Carpenter's films, it has grown into a cult classic over the years. In fact, Christine has carved out a niche for itself, not just in Carpenter's filmography, but in the horror genre as well. First off, let's give credit where it's due here. Christine turned a car into one of horror's most iconic villains. Think about how difficult that is. This isn't a mass killer stalking teenagers or a supernatural entity hiding in the shadows. It's a car, a shiny, pristine Plymouth Fury. Yet Carpenter's direction and Keith Gordon's performance as Arnie make Christine feel just as menacing, if not more so, than many flesh and blood antagonists. Christine herself has become an enduring symbol of vehicular horror, influencing everything from Stephen King's Maximum Overdrive to the bizarrely entertaining movie Rubber. The concept of inanimate objects coming to life has always had a place in horror, but Christine set the gold standard for how to do it right, making the object not just threatening, but charismatic. The way Christine moves, gleams, and even kills feels personal, and that's a testament to Carpenter's ability to imbue her with a personality that's without really over-explaining her supernatural origins. The film's legacy also lies in its delicate balancing act between horror and character-driven storytelling. Few directors could make a possessed car genuinely terrifying while keeping us in the audience emotionally invested in its owner's downward spiral. But Carpenter does this with such finesse that you can't help feel torn. On one hand, you're horrified by Christine's bloodthirsty nature. On the other, you're equally disturbed by how Arnie, once a sweet, awkward teenager, becomes something darker and more twisted under her influence. This duality, the monster outside and the monster within, is what gives the story its staying power. Arnie's transformation, played masterfully again, Keith Gordon deserves all the credit in the world. It's another reason why Christine resonates to this day. His descent into obsession and arrogance mirrors Christine's growing malevolence. It creates a character dynamic that feels all too human, despite the supernatural premise. It's not just a film about a killer car, it's a film about how power, once tasted, can consume us. That psychological depth gives Christine an edge over many horror films that rely solely on scares. And you can't overlook Christine's influence on pop culture. The image of her fiery silhouette speeding down a dark road, the headlights blazing, is unforgettable. It's a moment that's been referenced, parodied, paid homage to in countless ways. Christine is more than just a car. She's a character, an icon, and a testament to Carpenter's ability to turn the ordinary into extraordinary and to make something that lasts. Over the years, critics and audiences alike have really come to appreciate Christine more for what it is, a genre film with a lot on its mind. While it's never going to achieve the status of Halloween or The Thing, it has found its place as a unique entry in Carpenter's career, a film that showcased his ability to mix horror, heart, and a little bit of rock and roll. So what's the legacy of Christine? It's proof that even the unlikeliest of monsters can leave a lasting impact when placed in the hands of a master like Carpenter. Whether you're here for the thrills, the chills, or the psychological depth, Christine has something to offer. And it's why she's still cruising on TV and streaming services decades later. So let's talk about the reception over time. When Christine first hit theaters back in 1983, it was received, the reception was lukewarm. Critics had mixed feelings. Many did praise its undeniable style, but questioned whether there was enough substance under the hood. Some saw it as a fun but minor entry in both Carpenter's filmography and the wave of Stephen King adaptations of the era. It was overshadowed by Carpenter's previous work, specifically Halloween, as well as the massive popularity of Carrie and The Shining already in the King universe. But there's one thing about Christine, like the car, it didn't stay down for long. Over the years, the film has undergone this major reevaluation. As I mentioned, modern critics and audiences have come to see it more than just a flashy vehicle for thrills. Today, it's appreciated for that unique blend of the supernatural, psychological, and coming-of-age storytelling, all wrapped up in this signature tension-building style of John Carpenter. And what's fascinating to me is how Christine has resonated with newer generations of horror fans. On the surface of the story, it's just about a killer car. But when you dig a little deeper, it's a tale about identity, obsession, and as I mentioned, that seductive pull of power. These are timeless themes, and they hit just as hard today as they did in 1983, maybe even more so. And then let's not forget Christine herself. Villains come and go in horror, but Christine is still one of the coolest and most unique. She's not terrifying. She's stylish, seductive, and unforgettable. The sight of her cruising down the street, headlights glowing like a predator, is that iconic image. And unlike other antagonists, Christine doesn't need words or a mask or even a driver to make her presence known. That quiet, relentless menace is part of what makes her a standout. In many ways, and like a lot of Carpenter's early work, Christine was just ahead of its time. The slow burn horror, the psychological layers, and the focus on character development weren't what audiences of the time were really looking for. But today, it's those exact elements that make it feel fresh. The film has really earned its place as a genre gem, not just for scares, but for the way it explores that darker side of human nature and the things we hold dear. So, as we've seen with just about all of Carpenter's films up to this point, and for the most part in general, it didn't roar out of the gates, but it has steadily gained traction over the decades. And it's proof that sometimes the best stories aren't immediately understood. They have to grow on you, revving their engines in the background until you're ready to appreciate them. If anything, Christine's appeal now just reinforces what Carpenter had always been doing best. crafting films that will linger in your mind long after the credits roll. Let's really dig into some of the standout moments that make Christine so captivating. If there's one scene that perfectly captures the essence of Carpenter's brilliance, it's the self-repair sequence. So picture this. Christine, battered and broken after a brutal attack, begins to heal herself in the darkened garage. The headlights flicker on, casting eerie shadows, and the metal bends and reshapes as if by magic. It's pure visual poetry, and it blends the practical effects with Carpenter's knack for creating an otherworldly atmosphere. And all of this happens without a single line of dialogue. The car's eerie resurrection speaks volumes on its own. It's this chilling reminder that Christine's not an ordinary car. She's an unstoppable predator. Then there's Arnie's transformation, which is one of the film's most fascinating aspects. One pivotal moment is his first confrontation with his bullies after Christine's influence starts taking hold. Gone now is the shy, awkward teenager, replaced by a version of Arnie who's confident, calculating, and menacing. This is where Keith Gordon absolutely nails the shift. He delivers a performance that feels authentically unsettling. It's not just Arnie's swagger that changes. You can see it in his eyes, you can hear it in his voice. He's no longer just a kid. He's someone who's embraced the darkness, and Christine is fueling that fire. Other thing that sets Christine apart in Carpenter's filmography is its tone. Unlike Halloween or The Thing, this film isn't about jump scares or grotesque body hair horror. Instead, it's this slow psychological burn that explores the toll of obsession. Carpenter takes his time building that tension and letting that horror seep into the characters' lives rather than pushing forward, rushing into that shock value. Another fascinating thing about Christine is how Carpenter blurs the lines between supernatural and psychological. Is Arnie's descent into darkness entirely Christine's doing, or is the car merely amplifying something that was already inside him? That ambiguity makes the story even more compelling, and it forces us to question how much of the horror is external, how much of it is internal. And Christine herself, the car, more than killing machine, terrifying, seductive, possessive. Carpenter gave her that presence that feels almost human, like it was an actress portraying the role. From the way she gleams under the lights to the way she chooses her victims, Christine's a metaphor for unchecked obsession and power, and she demands your attention when she's on screen. One of my favorite elements is how Carpenter uses subtle visual clues to tell the story. Take the reflections in Christine's hood, for example. They often mirror Arnie's transformation, showing his face distorted or fractured as his personality changes. It's small, almost imperceptible detail, but it speaks volumes about the care Carpenter put into crafting the film. At the core, Christine is about the cost of desire, that dangerous allure of power. It's also a coming-of-age story, twisted with a cautionary tale. Carpenter's signature style, elevating it to something memorable. The film asks us to consider, what would we sacrifice to feel strong, to feel seen, and at what point do we lose ourselves in the process? For all these reasons, Christine stands out as a unique entry in Carpenter's filmography. It's less overtly terrifying than some of his works, but it lingers with you. It gets under your skin in a very haunting way. And that, my friends, is what makes it worth revisiting time and time again. So Christine, what a ride, right? It's a sleek, stylish, and dripping with Carpenter's signature flair. It's by no means the scariest film in his lineup, but it's one of his most iconic, one of his most character-driven and emotionally layered stories. It's this movie that's about obsession, identity, and the seductive pull of power, all wrapped up in a crimson red Plymouth Fury with a killer soundtrack. For me, what sets it apart is how Christine balances the supernatural and the psychological. It's not just about a killer car, it's about how that car changes people, how it magnifies insecurity, pushes them to the edge, and that's why it still resonates today. So what do I give it? For me, Christine is a 7 out of 10. It's not going to hit the same iconic heights as Halloween or The Thing, but it holds a very unique and well-deserved place in Carpenter's career. The film is a fascinating blend of genre elements. It's a horror movie with a heart and a dash of tragedy. Now, next time, when we continue going through Carpenter's career, we're going to shift gears into a different kind of terror with The Fog. If ghost stories, atmospheric dread, and creepy coastal towns are your thing, you won't want to miss this. And trust me, there's plenty to unpack there. So mark your calendars, prepare for a haunting good time, and thank you so much for riding shotgun with me on this episode of Real Talk Horror. Whether you're a hardcore Carpenter fan or you're just starting to discover his work, I hope you enjoyed this dive into Christine. Don't forget to come connect with us over on Instagram and Threads at Real Talk, where we post updates, some polls, we peek behind the curtain, and your feedback means the world to me. So if you love this episode, or even if you just liked it, leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. Every star, every comment really helps put a smile on my face, if nothing else. And until next time, keep your headlights on, check your rearview mirror, and most importantly, stay creepy. See you soon.